She didn't even look me in the eye when she stole everything I created. That was the moment I realized I wasn't her daughter. I was just another asset to exploit. My name is Amara Knight. I'm 24, an MIT graduate with a degree in robotics and AI systems, and up until last year, I thought I was building the future with my mother. She's the CEO of Greenfields Agrotech, one of the largest agricultural conglomerates in the country. I grew up believing she was a visionary, someone who turned our family farm into a global powerhouse. I worshipped her, really. Wanted to be like her. So when I came home after graduation with a prototype of my own, a low-cost, AI-driven drone system that could automate planting, irrigation, and crop monitoring for small farms, I thought she'd be proud. I'd spent my final year developing it in secret, using borrowed lab time and a tiny inheritance from my grandfather to fund the parts. This could change everything, I told her, practically shaking with excitement. It makes high-tech agriculture accessible, not just for industrial farms like ours, but for struggling family farms, like where you started. She listened, nodded, even smiled a little. Then she asked to see the schematics. I showed her everything: hardware design, software code, deployment plans. I thought I was finally earning her respect. 3 weeks later, she filed a patent. Under her name. Without telling me. I found out through a press release. Greenfields acquires breakthrough OI farming technology, developed in-house. My invention, my code, my dream, erased from the record, rebranded as hers. When I confronted her in her office, shaking with rage, she didn't deny it. "This belongs to the family," she said coolly, folding her arms. "You were going to waste it. Give it away to poor farmers. We need solutions for investors, not charities." My jaw dropped. "So you just took it? Without even asking? You live under my roof. You used our resources. That makes it company property." I had used her Wi-Fi. That was it. She walked over to her desk, picked up a file, and tossed it onto the floor in front of me. "You'll be credited as an intern if you behave. Or, you can leave." I stood there for a full minute, numb. Then, I picked up the file, tore it in half, and walked out. No screaming, no slamming doors. Just silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than any fight. I moved out that night, slept on the floor of my best friend Juno's garage. He's a cybersecurity expert who'd always warned me not to trust my mother with my IP. I should have listened. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom: it clears the path for something better. With Juno's help, I rebuilt everything. From scratch. Better, faster, stronger, and this time, completely encrypted and protected. No one could steal it again. Not even her. I called it Project Iris. Not just a new version of my drone tech, but an entire ecosystem of automation tools for small farms. Soil sensors, AI crop analysis, drone-managed planting and irrigation, all accessible through a simple interface and cheap enough for real farmers to afford. I didn't need her money. I needed a mission. And I had one. For months I worked in that garage, living on instant noodles and borrowed hope. I launched a website, released a demo video, created a mailing list, and slowly something started to happen. People started writing in, real farmers, families struggling to keep their land. They wanted to try it. And then it happened. One afternoon, while checking my email, I saw a message with a subject line that made my stomach drop. Urgent, licensing inquiry, from Horizon AgTech. Horizon was Greenfield's biggest competitor, a corporate giant my mother had once called the scavengers of the industry. And now they were reaching out to me, directly. I opened the message. "We've seen your demo. We're interested in licensing Project Iris for national rollout. Under one condition, we need a test deployment inside Greenfield's territory, specifically one of their industrial farms in Nebraska." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. They wanted me to test Project Iris on her land. The same land she stole my dream to protect. And just like that, I knew. She had no idea what I was about to do next. I stared at that email for 10 minutes before I could breathe again. We want to license Project Iris for a pilot deployment on Greenfield's land, the same land my mother had stolen my invention to protect. The irony hit like a punch to the chest. I had built this technology for farmers, people like my grandparents, who'd worked the soil with their bare hands, not for billion-dollar corporations who crushed innovation to maintain their monopoly. But now, I had a choice. I could say no and keep my conscience clean. Or I could say yes, and watch her empire kneel to the very invention she tried to erase me from. You already know what I chose. The next few days were a blur. I met with Horizon's team over video, and they didn't care that I was 24, living in a garage and wearing the same hoodie 3 days in a row. They only cared that my system worked, that it was cheaper, faster, and more adaptable than anything they'd ever seen. They offered me $150,000 up front for a limited licensing deal, plus full support to deploy it in the Nebraska facility, which they'd quietly acquired 6 months earlier. Yes. One of Greenfield's prized properties was now under their control. My mother had no idea. We worked around the clock to get the system installed. Juno tightened the network security until even a government hacker couldn't breach it. I calibrated the drones myself, tuned the AI algorithms, synced the sensors to weather data. And after 3 weeks of setup, we went live. The results were almost immediate. Crop yields up by 17% in the first 10 days. Labor costs down by 40%. Energy usage optimized, water waste reduced. Even Horizon's executives were shocked. This wasn't just a good product, it was a revolution, one they now owned a piece of. And then, the phone rang. I hadn't spoken to my mother in almost 4 months, not since she told me I was just an intern in her legacy. But when I saw her name flash across my screen, my hands went cold. I didn't pick up. The voicemail came minutes later. Amara, we need to talk. There's a situation at the Nebraska farm. I think someone's using your technology, or a copy of it. We're being outperformed on our own land. If this is some kind of game, I suggest you call me back, immediately. I sat there, letting the words echo in my head. She didn't know. She had no idea I was behind it. That Project Iris hadn't just survived her betrayal. It had evolved, grown teeth. And now it was outperforming the knockoff she'd stolen and sold. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. But it still hurt that it had to come to this. That night, Juno and I celebrated with greasy pizza and cheap champagne. We toasted to surviving, to starting over, to building something no one could take from us again. But the celebration didn't last. 2 days later, an article dropped on Agritech News. Rising star Amara Knight disrupts farming industry with game-changing AI system. My name. My face. A full feature on Project Iris, complete with quotes from Horizon's CTO and photos from the deployment site. It went viral in our industry, and that's when everything exploded. By noon, my inbox was flooded. Venture capital firms, farmers, journalists, even government agencies. And by 2 p.m., my mother showed up at Juno's garage. I wasn't prepared. She looked different. Not the composed CEO in tailored suits I remembered. Her hair was pulled back too tight, her eyes bloodshot, her voice raw. "You did this?" she hissed, stepping into the garage like she still owned it. "That farm, that software, that article. You're trying to humiliate me." I stood up, calm but shaking inside. "No," I said. "I'm trying to fix what you broke." She laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you've done. The board is furious. Our investors are threatening to pull out. Because of you." "Because of you," I corrected. "You stole my work, lied about it, and now someone better is doing it right." She stepped closer, inches from my face. "I built this family's empire. I'm Greenfield's. And if you think I'll let you take that from me, you're more naive than I thought." I didn't flinch. "I'm not taking anything," I said. "But I'm not giving it back, either." Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You think Horizon's your ally? They'll drop you the second they don't need you, just like I did." And with that, She walked out. I stood there frozen, because deep down, I knew she might be right. The garage felt smaller after she left. Her words kept echoing in my head. They'll drop you just like I did. Cold, calculated, meant to slice. But that wasn't what shook me most. What scared me was the flicker of truth in it. I trusted Horizon because they backed me when no one else would. But they were still a corporation. And I just watched one powerful woman steal everything from her own daughter. What would stop another? So, I did what I always do when I'm scared. I got to work. Juno and I spent the next 48 hours reviewing every line of the Horizon contract, every clause, every loophole, just in case. Then we started preparing for worst-case scenarios. Step 1 was reintegrating Project Iris into our own private network. Horizon only had rights to deploy Iris. They didn't own the code. But if they tried to clone it, if they tried to lock us out, I needed a kill switch. So, I built one. We called it Rootfall, a protocol that would detect unauthorized replication, sever all cloud access, and corrupt the cloned system. A last resort, but a necessary one. Still, I hoped we wouldn't need it. For a few weeks, things were quiet. Too quiet. I kept pushing updates to Iris. We added multilingual voice control, predictive crop health alerts, and energy efficiency optimizers. Farmers loved it. Feedback poured in. Horizon's pilot rollout expanded to 6 more sites. Investors flooded them with praise. And then, they ghosted me. Emails unanswered, meetings rescheduled. My dev access to their farm network was quietly downgraded. Even the project manager who'd championed Iris stopped replying. Something was wrong. Then, one night, Juno burst into the garage, holding his laptop like it was on fire. "You need to see this." It was an article leaked from an insider blog. Horizon unveils proprietary FarmBot OS, built in-house to revolutionize agtech. My mouth went dry. The screenshots, the features, the interface. It was Iris, dressed up in new colors. But it was mine. I scrolled, heart pounding. The launch was scheduled for next week at AgriNext Expo, the exact same event my mother's company had planned to showcase their failing tech pivot. Suddenly, it all made sense. Horizon wasn't just stealing my invention. They were timing their betrayal perfectly, to crush greenfields and claim the industry for themselves. And they were using my work to do it. I couldn't breathe. Not out of sadness, out of rage. First my mother, now them. I'd built something to lift farmers, to give power back to the people who fed us. And now 2 corporate giants were fighting over it like it was just another trophy in a pissing contest. I looked at Juno. "Activate Rootfall." His eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "They stole it," I whispered. "They don't get to keep it." He nodded once. No hesitation. We launched the script and watched the status lights shift from green to red. Across 6 farms, the system froze, then wiped. By morning, Horizon's entire deployment network was down. Every FarmBot OS went dark. Their executives scrambled to explain the failure. Farmers panicked. And the launch at AgriNext Expo canceled. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came that same afternoon when I got a private message on my encrypted server. No sender, no subject. Just one sentence. "You just declared war on both of us." Attached was a screenshot, a video call, between my mother and Horizon's CTO, smiling, shaking hands. And right there on the table between them was a contract, a merger agreement. They weren't enemies, they were partners. Comment the number 3 if you want to see how Amara will destroy them both from the inside out. They weren't just trying to steal my invention anymore. They were trying to erase me from the industry I helped create. My mother and Horizon's CTO, smiling, shaking hands, planning a merger behind closed doors. That single screenshot hit harder than anything she'd ever said to my face. She hadn't just sold me out once. She was doing it again. Only this time, she wasn't taking credit. She was handing it off to someone else. I should have been crushed, but I wasn't. I was focused, calm, scarily so. Because this time, I was ready. The moment Rootfall disabled Horizon's stolen systems, we triggered Phase 2 of our plan. Juno and I had spent weeks preparing for the possibility that they'd try something underhanded. What Horizon didn't know was that their copy of my software had been quietly feeding us data. Every modification, every server ping, every access point they tried to reroute. They'd built their house on my foundation, and I knew every secret tunnel under it. I launched a live stream that afternoon, under my real name, with my face front and center. The title? The Truth About Project Iris, and Who Really Tried to Steal It. I didn't hold back. I laid out the timeline, the emails, the original schematics, the code commits. I showed how my mother filed a patent on stolen work, how Horizon quietly acquired deployment sites near Greenfield's land, and how the so-called FarmBot OS was a direct plagiarized shell of Iris. I even showed the screenshots of their secret call. Then I did something bold. I announced that the real Project Iris was being released. Open source. Free. Public. Protected by a new kind of licensing that would allow any small farmer, anywhere, to use it and improve it without fear of corporate ownership. No subscriptions, no hidden fees, no takeover attempts. I wasn't selling it anymore. I was setting it free. The live stream exploded. Within hours, it hit 1 million views. Farmers flooded the comments, calling me a hero. Developers asked how they could contribute. Independent co-ops and community gardens reached out to deploy Iris immediately. Meanwhile, Greenfields and Horizon, they were on fire. Their merger announcement, which was scheduled for the next morning, fell apart in real time. The press turned on them. Horizon's stock plummeted. Investors pulled out, citing ethical concerns and IP instability. Greenfield's board members demanded an emergency vote to remove my mother as CEO. And still, it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because I wasn't just here to ruin their deal, I was here to replace them. Remember that $150,000 Horizon paid me up front? I never spent it. I used it to quietly buy controlling interest in a small agricultural tech firm called Verdant Solutions, a longtime competitor of Greenfield's, one they'd nearly bankrupted with patent lawsuits years ago. Verdant's owned valuable land, equipment, and most importantly, a legacy of serving real farmers. They just needed leadership, so I gave them Iris. I gave them open source access. And I gave them one more thing, myself. I was named interim CTO by the end of the week. By the following month, Verdant's had acquired dozens of Greenfield's former clients and sites. My mother called me twice. I didn't answer. Then came the final blow. A subpoena. From my mother. She was suing me for defamation, for sabotage, for intentional reputational harm. She claimed I destroyed her legacy out of spite. I showed it to Juno and laughed. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he handed me a flash drive. "What's this?" I asked. "I thought we might need it one day," he said quietly. It was a voice recording from 3 months earlier. My mother, on speakerphone, talking to Horizon's CTO, saying she knew the software was mine, saying, quote, "I don't care if it's illegal. She won't fight me. She's too emotional." My stomach dropped. She hadn't just stolen it, she'd admitted it, out loud, on tape, and Juno had recorded the whole thing. I stared at the flash drive in my hand like it was made of fire. 3 months ago, Juno had recorded my mother admitting, in her own voice, that she knew Project Iris was mine, that she didn't care, that I was, and I quote, "too emotional to fight back." She was wrong. I was never too emotional. I was too patient. And now, she had handed me the last piece I needed. We submitted the recording to our legal team that same night. Paired with my patents, development logs, public code repository, and the original email trail, it formed an airtight case. Not just against my mother, but against Horizon too. Because their CTO was right there in the recording, agreeing to use stolen tech in exchange for market leverage. The lawsuit we filed was brutal. IP theft, conspiracy, intentional fraud, public deception. We didn't just go after individuals. We went after both companies. And the timing couldn't have been worse for them. Because while their lawyers scrambled to craft excuses, the story leaked. The headline across every major tech outlet the next morning: whistleblower drops recording proving CEO and CTO conspired to steal Invention from own daughter. Within hours, Horizon's board voted to suspend their CTO. Greenfield's did the same with my mother, though hers came with a press statement full of sanitized nonsense about reflecting on her leadership. But the damage was done. Their reputations collapsed. Investors pulled out. Licensing partners walked away. Former employees came forward, confirming this wasn't the first time either company had bent the rules to protect their power. It was just the first time someone had fought back and won. The court ruling came 2 months later, full damages awarded. I was officially recognized as the sole inventor of Project Iris and its derivatives. Horizon and Greenfields were ordered to pay a combined $18.6 million in restitution and legal fees. Their attempted merger was blocked permanently due to antitrust and fraud violations. But what really broke my mother was what came next. She was blacklisted. No board would touch her. No investor wanted her name on a deck. The woman who once ran one of the largest agricultural empires in the country was now untouchable. She tried to pivot to consulting. No one called. She tried to launch a podcast. No one listened. She sent me a letter after the ruling, handwritten, pages of apologies, excuses, half-hearted confessions. She said she was proud of me, that she just didn't know how to love me without controlling me. I didn't respond. Because the truth is, I don't hate her anymore. I pity her. She sacrificed everything, family, legacy, ethics, for the illusion of control. And in the end, all it got her was silence. But me, I kept building. Verdant Solutions became a rising star in ethical agri-tech. With Project Iris now open source, we launched an initiative that gave underfunded farmers access to free tech, training, and drone systems. We partnered with schools, trained the next generation of engineers, and even brought Juno on full-time as our chief security officer. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to what had been taken from me. I was creating something no one could ever take again. I was sitting in a field last month, one of our newest partner farms, a small operation run by a single mom and her teenage son, watching a drone gently mist rows of spinach as the sun set. She turned to me and said, "I don't know who built this system, but it saved our farm." I smiled. I think she'd be really happy to hear that. Because the best revenge? It's not lawsuits, it's not courtrooms or exposés or financial ruin. It's watching someone try to bury you and growing something bigger right on top of it. Comment the number 3 if you want to see more stories where karma comes back in the most satisfying way. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next one. You won't believe what's coming.